I used to think forgiveness was something you gave after a heartfelt apology, but I was wrong. Sometimes forgiveness is a letter you write and never send. My name is Marjorie Hayes. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent most of my life in a quiet little town outside Savannah, Georgia. Folks here know me as the woman who still sets 2 plates at the dinner table, one for myself and one for the man who walked out 30 years ago. I still remember the night he left. Rain beating against the windows, my hands trembling over the pot of stew I had just cooked. "I can't do this anymore, Marjorie," he said. His voice was cold like the storm outside. I stood there in silence, too proud to beg, too broken to breathe. That was the night my heart folded into itself like wet paper. And yet, every year on his birthday, I still find myself baking his favorite pie, pecan, with extra butter crust. People call it foolishness. I call it unfinished business. 3 days ago, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in the same crooked handwriting I thought I'd never see again. I held it in my hands for hours, afraid that opening it might tear open every wound I'd spent decades trying to close. When I finally opened it, my knees gave out. "Marjorie," it began, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm dying, and there are things I need to say before it's too late." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears falling before I could even read the rest. That night, I sat by the window, staring into the storm, just like 30 years ago. The difference was, this time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to remember or forget. Something deep inside whispered, maybe this is your chance to heal.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that letter burning in my mind. Those words, "I'm dying," echoing in my chest like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. By morning, my eyes were swollen, and the kitchen smelled of burnt toast. I hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. I sat at the table, rereading the letter until I could almost feel his voice. He wrote about regrets, about how he'd run because he couldn't face himself after what he'd done. He said he had remarried once, then lost everything: his wife, his son, even his home. "I thought leaving you was saving you," he wrote, "but all I did was condemn myself. For 30 years, I had painted him the villain. It was easier that way. But now, this fragile man on paper didn't sound like the monster I'd imagined. He sounded human, broken, and full of sorrow, and that scared me more than anything." I walked to the back porch, the one he built with his bare hands, and stared at the overgrown garden. The magnolia tree we planted together was still standing strong, its blossoms white as forgiveness itself. I whispered to it, "Why now? Why after all these years?" There was an address scribbled at the end of the letter, some hospice home in North Carolina. I folded it back, heart pounding. Should I go? After all this time? Did I owe him that? My neighbor Ruth knocked on the door that evening. She's been my friend since childhood, one of those women who always knows when you're about to break. She looked at my face and didn't ask a single question, just poured 2 cups of tea and said softly, "Sometimes God sends storms to wash away what we've buried too deep." Her words stayed with me long after she left. I walked back into the kitchen, unfolded that letter once more, and whispered, "Maybe it's time." For the first time in years, I packed a suitcase. Not to run away, but to face the ghost I'd been feeding with silence. The drive to North Carolina felt like traveling through my own memories. Every highway exit, every lonely motel sign flickering in the dark carried a whisper of the past. I hadn't been on a long trip in years. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached. But my heart was louder than the tires against the road. I stopped once, at a small diner by the roadside. The waitress, a young girl with freckles and a wide smile, poured my coffee and said, "Long drive, huh?" I smiled weakly. Longest one of my life. She didn't know how true that was. When I finally reached the hospice home, the sky was painted in twilight.
half gold, half blue. I sat in the car for nearly an hour, staring at the entrance, too afraid to walk in. I thought about the last time I saw him, his face, proud and angry, his back turned as he left. I tried to imagine him now, frail, sick, asking for forgiveness. Finally, I whispered to myself, "You came this far, Marjorie. Don't stop now." Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and fading lilies. A nurse led me to his room. "He's been asking if you'd come," she said softly. My knees nearly gave out. When I walked in, I didn't recognize him. The man who once carried Lumper with his bare arms now looked like a shadow of himself, thin, pale, with eyes sunken deep, but still holding a spark of something I remembered. He turned his head slowly. "Marjorie?" My lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, all the years between us vanished, leaving only two people who had once loved and broken each other. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but instead, I walked to his bedside and sat down. His hand trembled as he reached out. I hesitated, then took it. His skin was cold, his pulse faint. "He didn't think you'd come," he whispered. "I almost didn't," I said quietly. But then I realized if I didn't, I'd be carrying this pain for another 30 years. We sat in silence, both of us too full of words and too afraid to speak them. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, cleansing, familiar. He fell asleep not long after our first meeting. The nurse said the medication made him drowsy, but I could tell exhaustion ran deeper than that. It was the kind of tired that comes from a lifetime of running from your own mistakes. I sat by his bed for hours, listening to the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the soft hum of the rain outside. Every sound felt like a heartbeat, reminding me that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a slow, painful rhythm you have to learn to live by. I remembered the first time we met, all those years ago in the church choir. He had a laugh that could fill a room. I was a young woman then, headstrong, full of dreams. He used to say I was the light of his world. Funny how love can turn from a sunrise to a storm without you realizing when the clouds began to gather. When he woke up again, his voice was barely a whisper. "You look the same," he said, smiling faintly. "You must be seeing things," I replied, managing a small laugh. "No," he said, "it's your eyes. They still have that fire." His words made my throat tighten. I didn't know what to do with the tenderness in his tone, like it had traveled through years of silence just to reach me. He asked about our son. My breath caught. "Marcus?" I said softly. "He's fine. Teaches music at a local school now." He turned his face toward the window, tears glistening in his hollow eyes. I wanted to see him once more, but I don't deserve that. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was right, that he didn't, but I couldn't, because in that moment, I saw not the man who left, but the man who broke under the weight of his own regret. "I'll tell him," I said quietly. "I'll tell him you asked." He smiled weakly. "That's more grace than I deserve." I reached out and brushed his hand again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger burning in my chest, only sorrow and a strange kind of peace. The next morning, I woke up on the little couch in his room. The nurse had covered me with a blanket sometime during the night. I could hear the soft hum of the oxygen machine, steady and constant. He was still breathing, shallow but there. I sat up slowly, watching him. He looked peaceful, his chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. For years, I had imagined what I'd say if I ever saw him again. I had rehearsed words filled with fury, questions like blades. "Why did you leave me? Why did you leave your son?" But now, all that anger felt small compared to the silence between us. When he woke, his voice was weaker. "You stayed." "I did," I whispered. He looked at me with eyes that seemed older than his years. "You always had more strength than I did." I shook my head. "No, I just learned how to keep walking." For a moment, we both smiled. The kind of smile that comes after a storm, tired, uncertain, but real. Later that day, I stepped outside the hospice to get some air. The garden was small but beautiful, filled with lavender and white roses. A wooden bench stood beneath a maple tree, and I sat there, feeling the gentle wind on my face. A chaplain walked by and stopped when he saw me. "You're Marjorie, right?" he asked kindly. I nodded. "He's been talking about you," the chaplain said. "He said if he could turn back time, he'd never have let you go." Those words hit me harder than any apology, because sometimes regret is its own punishment. That night, when I went back to his room, he looked weaker. His hand searched for mine in the dim light. "Marjorie," he whispered, "when I'm gone, don't let this pain bury you. Promise me that." Tears welled up as I nodded. "I promise," I said, and for the first time, I meant it.
Mary sat on the edge of her bed, the early morning light streaming through the half-drawn curtains. Her fingers ran across the soft fabric of her blanket, tracing the same spot again and again, a habit she had developed as a child when anxiety wouldn't let her sleep. The house was silent, almost too silent. Cassandra and Lucas were asleep in their rooms, and James had left early for work. Yet, despite the peace, her mind was loud. She had spent the past few days trying to convince herself that forgiveness meant peace, that giving Cassandra a second chance was the right thing, for Lucas, for herself, for her own soul. But deep inside, a new unease had begun to grow. There were small things. A phone call cut short when Mary entered the room, a hushed conversation near the window, Cassandra's sudden decision to visit a friend every other evening. It could all be innocent, Mary told herself, yet something in her gut, that same instinct that had warned her about her husband's betrayal years ago, whispered otherwise. That morning, as she made tea, her hands trembled slightly. The spoon clinked against the cup. "No, don't overthink," she muttered to herself. But when she turned to find Cassandra standing at the doorway, phone still in hand, face pale, Mary's heart skipped a beat. "Who was that?" she asked, forcing calm. Cassandra hesitated. "Just a friend from the counseling group," she said quickly. Mary nodded. "Good," she replied, though her voice held no conviction. But as Cassandra left, Mary's gaze fell on the edge of a piece of paper sticking out of Cassandra's handbag, a logo she recognized, Barton Finance. Her husband's old workplace, the one where Cassandra had once stolen from, the same place that had nearly destroyed her life. A chill ran down her spine. That evening, when Cassandra took Lucas to the park, Mary found herself pacing near the hallway. She knew she shouldn't invade someone's privacy. She knew trust meant giving space, but the thought that history might be repeating itself, that her generosity might have opened the door to another betrayal, became unbearable. She stepped quietly into Cassandra's room. The air smelled faintly of lavender and cigarette smoke. On the desk, under a pile of letters, was a brown envelope, the same logo again. Mary's trembling hands opened it. Inside were financial statements, withdrawals, transfers, and a name, Lucas James Trust. Her heart pounded. Cassandra had withdrawn money, not a fortune, but enough to raise questions, enough to hurt. She sat down, her breath short. Maybe it's a misunderstanding, she thought. Maybe it's for Lucas. But when she flipped to the last page, she saw a recent deposit. Cassandra L. Personal Savings. Her tears welled in her eyes. When Cassandra returned home later that night, she found Mary sitting at the dining table, the papers laid out before her. Lucas had gone to bed, the silence heavy between them. "You went through my things," Cassandra said quietly. "And you went through my trust," Mary replied. The two women stared at each other, one filled with shame, the other with heartbreak. "I wasn't stealing," Cassandra said finally, voice trembling. I wanted to feel like I was worth something again, that I could take care of my son myself. I thought if I saved a little, I could—" "Without telling me?" Mary interrupted, her voice soft but sharp. "After everything?" Cassandra's eyes filled. "You wouldn't understand. You're the one who forgave me, but you'll never really trust me. You still see me as the girl who ruined everything." Mary didn't answer. The truth in Cassandra's words pierced her deeply. "I wanted to rebuild myself," Cassandra continued, "but every day here I feel like I'm living on borrowed kindness." Mary stood slowly, tears tracing her cheeks. "Then take it," she whispered. "Take the kindness, take the chance, but don't take my faith again." Cassandra broke down, sobbing into her hands. In that moment, Mary didn't see a thief or a liar. She saw a broken woman trapped between guilt and desperation. She walked over, gently placing a hand on Cassandra's shoulder. "You don't have to earn redemption by running from it," she said softly. "You earn it
by staying. The next morning, Cassandra was gone. The note on the kitchen table read, "I'm sorry. I need to fix myself before I can face you again. Please take care of Lucas." Mary sank into the chair, holding the note against her chest. For a long time, she didn't cry. She just sat there, the tea beside her growing cold. When James arrived later, she showed him the letter. He sighed deeply, wrapping an arm around her. "You did everything you could," he whispered. Mary looked out the window. The sunlight hitting the garden fence, the small swing Lucas loved still swaying gently in the wind. "I just hope she finds her way back before it's too late," she said. As the day faded into evening, the house felt emptier than ever. Yet somewhere deep within that emptiness, a fragile hope still flickered, faint, trembling, but alive.
The morning after Cassandra's disappearance began like any other, birds calling faintly beyond the fog-dusted window, sunlight creeping across the floor, and the kettle whistling in the distance. But in Mary's heart, the silence was not peaceful anymore. It was hollow, echoing with absence. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the letter one more time. The ink had smudged slightly where her tears had fallen the night before. "Please take care of Lucas." The words stung more with every read. Behind her, tiny footsteps approached. "Grandma?" Lucas's voice was soft, still heavy with sleep. Mary turned quickly, forcing a small smile. "Good morning, sweetheart. Where's Mommy?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. She froze for a second. "She went on a trip," she said carefully. "She'll be back soon." Lucas nodded slowly, though confusion clouded his face. He walked to the table, climbed onto the chair where Cassandra used to sit, and looked around, as if expecting his mother to appear with her warm laugh and the smell of toast. But the chair remained empty. Mary's chest tightened. Throughout the day, she tried to keep the boy busy, painting, reading, playing in the garden. But Lucas wasn't his usual bubbly self. He kept glancing toward the door every few minutes, listening for the sound of familiar footsteps. That evening, as the sun melted behind the clouds, Lucas came to Mary holding a drawing. It showed 3 stick figures, himself, Mary, and Cassandra. But Cassandra's figure had no face. "Grandma," he whispered, "did I make Mommy sad again?" The question pierced her heart like a knife. "No, my dear," she said, kneeling beside him. "She's just finding a way to be happy. She loves you very much." "Then why didn't she say goodbye?" Mary opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, she pulled him into a tight hug. His small hands gripped her sari, his face buried against her shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered, rocking him gently. "She'll come back." But that night, when Lucas was asleep, Mary sat by the window staring into the dark sky. Will she really come back? She wondered. The last time Cassandra had run, she'd vanished for years, but this time she had left her son, a piece of her heart behind. Maybe that meant there was still a chance. The next few days passed in a blur of routine and longing. Mary threw herself into caring for Lucas, making sure his meals were warm, his clothes neat, his laughter somehow still alive. Yet every time he smiled, she could see the shadow of a question behind his eyes, a question she had no courage to answer. One evening, when rain began to fall softly outside, Lucas sat by the window watching the droplets slide down the glass. "Grandma?" he said. "Do you think Mommy can see the same rain where she is?" Mary nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, love. Maybe she's looking at it right now and thinking of you." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll draw her something tomorrow, so when she comes back, she'll know I missed her." The innocence in his words broke something inside her. Later that night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Mary walked into Cassandra's empty room. The lavender scent had faded now, replaced by the cold stillness of absence. On the desk, the photograph of Lucas smiled back at her, the only thing Cassandra hadn't taken. Mary sat on the edge of the bed, holding the picture close. "You can run from your past," she whispered to the empty room, "but not from your love." The sound of thunder rolled outside, long and distant. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the house. It was soft at first, then urgent. Mary's heart leapt. Could it be? She rushed to the door and opened it, but it wasn't Cassandra. It was a tall man in a raincoat holding an envelope. "Mrs. Mary Collins?" he asked. "Yes." He handed her the letter. "It's from Barton Finance. It required your signature." Her breath caught. "Thank you," she murmured, closing the door slowly. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, and inside was a statement, an unexpected transaction. Cassandra had closed the secondary account she had created and transferred every last penny back into the Lucas James Trust.
Mary's eyes filled instantly. At the bottom was a note, handwritten, "I'm not running this time. I just need to make things right before I return. Tell Lucas I love him. Tell him I'm proud. C." For the first time in days, Mary smiled through her tears. She folded the note carefully, walked to Lucas's room, and sat beside him. He was asleep, his small hand clutching his drawing from earlier. A new one this time. It showed himself, his grandma, and his mother, all holding hands under a bright blue sky. Mary brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "She will come back, my love. She's finding her way home." Outside, the rain began to slow. The thunder softened into silence. And somewhere beyond that silence, beyond guilt, beyond distance, Cassandra walked alone under the same rain, whispering a prayer into the night. "Please give me one more chance," she said to the sky, "not from them, but from myself." And the rain answered, falling gently like forgiveness.
The rain had washed the streets clean, leaving the world smelling of wet earth and second chances. Cassandra walked along the empty road, her shoes soaked, her coat clinging to her trembling frame. For the first time in years, she didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't go back yet. Not until she'd earned the right to. She stopped at a small diner just off the highway. The fluorescent sign flickered, half-lit, buzzing faintly in the rain. Inside, a waitress in her 50s gave her a cautious smile. "Coffee?" she asked. Cassandra nodded, settling into a booth. When the cup arrived, she cupped it tightly, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. Across the diner, an old gospel song played softly on a dusty radio, something about mercy finding those who fall. For a moment, Cassandra closed her eyes. Mercy. It was a word she hadn't believed in for a long time. She thought of her mother, of the way Mary's hands used to brush her hair at night when she was a child, whispering prayers over her. She thought of Lucas, his bright eyes, his laughter that had once filled her small apartment, and she thought of how easily she'd broken all of it. Tears welled in her eyes. "God, if you're still there, please don't let me fail him again." The waitress came by again. "You all right, honey?" Cassandra forced a smile. "Just tired." The woman nodded knowingly. "Tired hearts are the ones that heal slow, but they do heal. Don't give up." Those words stayed with her long after she left. She found work at a small motel 2 towns away, cleaning rooms, washing sheets, keeping quiet. The pay was little, but it was honest. Every night, after her shift, she sat by the window of her small rented room, writing letters she never sent. Letters to Lucas, letters to her mother, letters to the person she wished to become. "Dear Lucas," she wrote one night, "you're probably asleep right now, dreaming about superheroes or spaceships. I hope when you wake up you smile, because somewhere your mommy is learning how to deserve you again." She folded the note, placed it in an old box she kept beside her bed, a box already full of unsent letters. Days turned into weeks, and slowly her hands began to steady. Her eyes began to lift. The darkness that had followed her started to lose its grip. But one evening, when she was leaving work, she saw something that made her stop cold. A man, tall, heavy-set, with cold eyes, was waiting near the parking lot. Her heart raced. It was Marcus, her ex-husband. "Cassandra," he called out, his voice sharp as glass. "You thought you could hide from me." Her throat dried. "Marcus, please." He stepped closer, the faint streetlight catching his scarred face. "You still owe me money, remember? You walked away before paying your debts." "I don't have it anymore," she said quietly. "I gave it back. To the trust, for our son." His expression twisted with fury. "That boy isn't mine anymore. You made sure of that." Cassandra stepped back, trembling. "Lucas is innocent. Don't drag him into this." Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip tightening. "You're gonna fix this, Cassandra. You owe me, and I always collect." Before she could react, the motel owner, Mr. Harlan, an older man with a kind face, appeared from behind the office. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus froze, his jaw tightening. "No problem," he muttered, then released her arm. "We'll finish this later." He turned and disappeared into the darkness. Cassandra collapsed against the wall, shaking. Mr. Harlan stepped forward gently. "You okay, Cass?" She nodded weakly. "Yeah, just an old ghost." "Well, ghosts can't hurt you if you stop feeding them. You're doing good here. Don't let the past pull you under again." She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Harlan." That night she couldn't sleep. The encounter had awakened old fears, but also something else. Determination. She walked to the small wooden cross she kept by the window and whispered, "No more running." She took out her old phone, hesitated for a long moment, then typed a message. "Mom, it's me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm trying. Please, tell Lucas I love him." She pressed send. Then she sat quietly,
watching the dawn arrive, the sky blooming in soft hues of gold and pink. For the first time, she didn't feel like a lost soul. She felt like a woman standing on the edge of redemption.
Mary had just returned from a long day at the community center in Birmingham. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in muted shades of orange and purple. Her hair, streaked with silver, fell loosely over her shoulders, and her hands were still dusted with chalk from teaching a financial literacy class for seniors. She had barely set her bag down when her phone buzzed insistently on the counter. The screen lit up with a message notification from an unknown number. Hesitant, she tapped it. "Mom, it's me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm trying. Please, tell Lucas I love him." Mary's heart stopped. She froze, the pen she had been using to tally donations slipping from her fingers. Her mind raced. Cassandra, after all these years, after all the betrayal, and now this. She sank into her chair, the world around her fading, the memories of pain, stolen savings, broken trust, shattered dinner times surged back. But beneath it all, something softer stirred. Hope. Could she truly forgive her daughter-in-law? For years she had wrestled with the idea. Forgiveness was a slippery thing. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about freeing herself from the chains of bitterness. And perhaps this message was the first step toward that freedom. Mary picked up her phone again, typing slowly. "Cassandra, thank you for reaching out. I will tell Lucas. Please be patient. Healing takes time." She pressed send, her hands trembling, a mix of fear and relief coursing through her veins. The next morning, Mary awoke before sunrise, the air crisp and quiet. She brewed a pot of chamomile tea and wrapped herself in a soft beige cardigan. She sat at her small oak desk, looking out at the dew-laden garden. The roses she had planted decades ago bloomed in pale pinks, a reminder of resilience and patience. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to rebuild bridges. Meanwhile, Cassandra was already preparing for the next step of her journey. She had secured a modest apartment near the community center, intending to start volunteering, not just for penance, but to genuinely contribute to the lives of others. She wanted to show Mary and Lucas, silently, without words, that she was changing. Her mornings began with coffee and quiet meditation. Even the small act of making her bed became a ritual, a symbol of putting her life in order, piece by piece. One day, as she walked to the community center, she encountered a stray dog shivering in the cold drizzle. Without hesitation, she scooped the dog into her arms, wrapping it in her worn coat. The dog's eyes reflected gratitude and trust, simple, honest, unspoken. Cassandra smiled softly. If only human hearts could be as straightforward as this little soul. Back at Mary's house, she prepared lunch with meticulous care. She knew she had to speak with Lucas soon. He had grown into a man of 27, strong yet gentle, carrying the subtle shadows of the past in his eyes. She had avoided confronting the wound of her mother's betrayal directly, letting him process it in his own time. When Lucas returned from work that afternoon, Mary was waiting in the kitchen, a plate of his favorite comfort food before him. His eyes widened slightly, surprised at the care and the simple gesture. "Mary?" he asked, cautious. Mary took a deep breath. "Lucas, I received a message today from Cassandra." His body tensed. "Cassandra, after all this time?" "Yes," Mary said softly. "She wants to reach out. She doesn't expect forgiveness, but she wants you to know she loves you. She's trying to make amends." Lucas sank into the chair opposite her, running a hand through his thick, dark hair. "I don't know if I can. I've carried so much anger for so long." Mary reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I know, sweetheart, and you don't have to rush. Healing isn't about moving fast, it's about moving at your own pace. But sometimes we have to open our hearts even a little to let the light in." Her words hung in the air like a delicate fragrance, soft yet persistent. Lucas nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding flickering in his eyes. Later that evening, Cassandra sat on the edge of her bed, pen in hand, writing another letter. "Dear Lucas," she wrote, "I cannot undo the past. I cannot take back the tears or the anger, but I can promise you this. Every day I will strive to become the person you deserve, the person your mother can trust again. Please, when you're ready, let me show you. No words, just actions." She folded the letter carefully, tucking it into the small wooden box she kept beside her bed, the same box where she had placed all her previous letters of reflection and apology. As the night deepened, the wind whispered through the cracks of her apartment window. Cassandra closed her eyes, letting the soft hum of the city lull her into a tentative calm. For the first time, she felt the heavy weight of guilt begin to lift, replaced by something lighter, the fragile hope that maybe redemption was possible.
The next morning, Mary awoke to a sky washed in soft gray, the drizzle of Birmingham rain tapping gently against the window. She wrapped herself in a deep green cardigan and brewed a pot of cinnamon tea, letting the scent fill the small kitchen. Today felt heavier than usual, but in a quiet, almost sacred way. The weight of possibility pressed gently on her shoulders. Her phone vibrated with a notification from the community center. Lucas had sent a message. "Mom, I want to go tomorrow to volunteer. Maybe I can meet her." Mary's heart thumped rapidly. She knew this step was monumental, the first real bridge between past wounds and the hope of reconciliation. She typed back, "Take your time, Lucas. The right time will come. I'll be there with you." The following morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the streets glistening under the soft, muted sun. The community center buzzed with life. Seniors filled the halls for their weekly activities, volunteers moved between tables distributing forms, and the aroma of coffee mingled with the faint scent of polished wood and cleaning supplies. Mary stood at the reception desk, her hands folded calmly, watching Lucas approach. His dark eyes were wary but resolute, the shadows of his past, confusion and anger softened by tentative hope. At the same time, Cassandra arrived at the center. She wore a navy peacoat over a light gray sweater, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, revealing streaks of silver that highlighted her age of 48. Her expression carried a quiet determination mixed with apprehension. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, yet nothing could fully prepare her for the reality of Lucas's presence. When their eyes met across the center, time seemed to pause. Lucas's jaw tightened and Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. There was a long suspended moment of silence, the weight of history and betrayal pressing between them. Mary stepped forward gently, placing a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Remember, son," she whispered, "you control this encounter. Nothing has to happen today that you're not ready for." Lucas nodded, swallowing hard. Cassandra took a deep breath, her hands clasped in front of her, and spoke softly, voice steady but delicate. "Lucas, I can't undo the past, but I want to start showing you who I've become. Not through words, but actions. Will you let me try?" Lucas looked at her, his eyes flickering with conflicting emotions, pain, anger, hesitation. But beneath it all, he saw something new, vulnerability, honesty, and a desire to make amends. Slowly, he nodded. Mary stepped back, silently observing, letting them two navigate this delicate moment. Cassandra spent the day at the center helping organize donation drives and assisting with paperwork. Her movements were deliberate, careful, yet natural. Every interaction with the seniors reflected her patience and growing compassion. She smiled gently at an elderly woman struggling to fill a form, showing her where to sign. She guided a small group of volunteers through the proper handling of donations, her voice calm and confident. Lucas watched from a nearby table, observing. He noted the subtle changes in her, the care, the humility, the commitment to helping others, rather than pursuing selfish interests. A small part of his heart, long buried under anger, began to thaw. During a break, Lucas approached her. He said,
I can see you've changed, he admitted, his voice low. It's different than I imagined. Cassandra's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She said, I know I have a long way to go, but every day I try. For you, for your mother, and for the people I've wronged in the past. Lucas nodded, a faint, hesitant smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It was fragile, almost imperceptible, yet it carried the weight of possibility. By late afternoon, the rain returned, soft and rhythmic, tapping against the center's windows. Mary watched from the reception desk as the two of them worked together. There was no forced friendliness, no rush to forgive, no pressure, only presence, effort, and a cautious trust being rebuilt, brick by brick. Mary felt a quiet warmth in her chest. She had witnessed many stories of betrayal and redemption in her years of social work, but this was personal, intimate, and infinitely delicate. She whispered under her breath, sometimes the first step is the hardest, but it is also the most important. That evening, as Mary and Lucas walked home under umbrellas, he finally spoke. Mom, I think I can do this. I think I can let her back into my life slowly. Not fully, not yet, but a little at a time. Mary squeezed his hand gently. That's all anyone can ask for. Lucas, healing takes patience and courage, both of which you have in abundance. The morning sun had barely risen over Atlanta, Georgia, when Mary opened the blinds of her small apartment. The light poured in softly, illuminating her modest living room with its carefully arranged furniture and framed family photos. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a quiet comfort in a world that had often felt chaotic and uncertain. Lucas arrived at the apartment early, as he had promised, wearing a gray hoodie over a white t-shirt, his brown eyes alert and thoughtful. Mary handed him a steaming cup of coffee, and they sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. Mom, he began cautiously, I've been thinking, maybe I can help more than just volunteer at the center. Maybe I can help her prove she's changed, not just to me, but to the people she hurt. Mary looked at him, her eyes warm but serious. Lucas, that's a big step. Are you ready for that responsibility? It won't be easy to trust her completely, but guiding her through meaningful work can help both of you grow. Lucas nodded, determination settling in his expression. I want to do this. I want to see real change, and maybe even give her a second chance. That afternoon, Lucas and Cassandra met at a local senior care home. Cassandra arrived in a maroon blouse, dark tailored pants, and low-heeled shoes, exuding a calm professionalism that contrasted with her past impulsiveness. Her hair was now cut shorter, with soft waved framing her mature, thoughtful face, emphasizing the resilience that had grown from her mistakes. Lucas observed as she interacted with the elderly residents, helping them with mobility exercises, engaging them in conversation, and assisting with lunch service. There was an authenticity to her actions that couldn't be faked. It was a slow, steady effort born of reflection and repentance. Mary watched from a corner, proud yet vigilant. She could see Lucas wrestling with his own emotions, resentment battling with hope, doubt clashing with curiosity. But with each small act of kindness, the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. During a break, Lucas approached Cassandra, sitting down beside her on a wooden bench overlooking the care home's garden. Cassandra, seeing you today, helping them, it's different. I can see the effort you're making, he said quietly. She glanced at him, eyes glistening, and replied softly, Lucas, I've hurt a lot of people, especially you. I can't take that back, but I want to spend my days proving I can do good instead of harm. I want to make amends where I can. Lucas nodded, absorbing her words. It's not easy to trust someone after they've hurt you, but I think I can try, slowly, step by step.
Over the next few weeks, their routine became steady. Cassandra arrived early to the center, helping organize donation drives, assisting seniors with paperwork, and participating in educational programs. Lucas joined her each time, initially skeptical of her intentions, but gradually allowing himself to notice her sincerity. One afternoon, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson struggled to sort through his medical bills. Cassandra knelt beside him, patiently explaining each form, her voice calm and reassuring. Lucas watched silently from a distance, noticing the genuine care in her tone, the patience in her movements. Mom was right, Lucas whispered to himself later that day. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it's real when you see it in actions. Mary, observing from the reception area, felt a quiet sense of relief. The past had been filled with pain, betrayal, and anger, but here, in this small corner of the world, trust was being rebuilt one act of kindness at a time. One evening, after the center had closed, Lucas and Cassandra stayed behind to sort through donations. The room was quiet, the fluorescent lights casting a soft glow over piles of clothes and canned goods. "I never realized how much work goes into this," Lucas admitted, folding a stack of gently used blankets. "It's exhausting, but I can see why it matters so much to you." Cassandra smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It matters because it changes lives. Every small effort counts. And I hope it shows you, too, that I can be someone who contributes rather than takes." Lucas paused, looking her carefully. "I think I'm starting to believe that. Not fully, not yet, but enough to see that you're serious." They worked in silence for a while, the quiet punctuated only by the soft rustle of clothing and the occasional clink of donation cans. Outside, the rain began again, gentle and rhythmic, mirroring the slow, steady progress of trust being rebuilt. That night, Mary reflected on the day. While sitting by her window, a blanket draped over her shoulders, she thought about the long journey they had all taken, from betrayal and despair to cautious hope and tentative reconciliation. She whispered a quiet prayer, thanking God for guidance, patience, and the courage to forgive. Sometimes, she realized, forgiveness was less about absolving someone else and more about freeing oneself from the weight of anger. And she could see that Lucas, too, was learning that lesson. As the rain tapped against the glass, Mary felt a deep calm settle within her. The storm of the past had not vanished entirely, but its fury had diminished, leaving behind fertile ground for growth, redemption, and love. The following week in Atlanta felt heavier than usual. The air hung thick with humidity, and the occasional rumble of distant thunder hinted at an approaching storm. Mary sat in her modest kitchen, sipping her chamomile tea, her gaze distant, as though trying to peer into the hearts of those she loved. Lucas had been quieter these days, his brow furrowed in thought, the weight of unresolved anger settling into the spaces between his words. He entered the kitchen, holding a folder filled with case files for the Senior Center's outreach program. "Mom," he said, voice tight, "I didn't expect this, but some of these people remind me of how I felt when I found out about Clara, the betrayal, the lies. It's still hard to let go completely." Mary set her cup down, resting both hands on the counter. Her eyes softened, but her expression remained firm. "Lucas, healing isn't a straight path. You feel betrayed, yes, but holding on to that anger won't bring you peace. It only extends the pain." He looked down, twisting the folder in his hands. "I know, Mom. I want to forgive, but it feels like I'm betraying my own memories if I do, like forgetting what I went through." Mary stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding not to let the wound define the rest of your life. Remember what you've learned from observing Cassandra. Actions, Lucas, not words. Watch the change and let that guide you." Later that day, Mary, Lucas, and Cassandra attended
attended a local community event in a park near downtown Atlanta. The sun filtered through thick clouds, casting patches of light over the gathering of elderly citizens, volunteers, and families. Cassandra moved through the crowd with purpose, organizing activities, helping seniors with games, and quietly checking on their comfort. Lucas followed her cautiously, observing every gesture, every interaction. He noticed how she approached each person with patience, listening to their stories without interruption, offering help without seeking recognition. Each act, though small, began to chip away at the layers of mistrust he had built around his heart. During a break, Lucas approached Mary, who was sitting on a weathered park bench, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Mary, I see it. She's changed, but it's not just about her. I have to change too if I'm ever going to fully forgive." Mary's eyes glistened with pride. "That's all anyone can ask for, Lucas. Self-reflection is a difficult path, but necessary. True forgiveness begins when you reconcile your own heart first." As the week progressed, Lucas continued to wrestle with his lingering resentment. Memories of betrayal surfaced at the most unexpected moments. The sound of a door closing, the sight of an envelope, even casual remarks. One evening, while sorting donation items at the center, Lucas came across an old financial ledger from the months Clara had drained the family accounts. He paused, staring at the faded ink, the meticulous numbers that had once symbolized loss and despair. His fists clenched, and for a fleeting moment he felt the old rage ignite. But then he remembered Mary's words, her calm guidance, and the quiet, steadfast presence of Cassandra helping seniors nearby. He exhaled slowly, placing the ledger back on the shelf. "It's not about erasing the past," he whispered to himself. "It's about learning to move forward without letting it control me." The next day brought a personal challenge for Cassandra. One of the residents, Mrs. Henderson, had been particularly wary of her presence, recalling the chaos Cassandra's past mistakes had caused in her community. Mrs. Henderson approached her during a craft session, eyes narrowed, arms crossed. "I don't know why you're here. You caused so much trouble before. How do we know this isn't just another mistake?" Cassandra met her gaze with humility, her voice soft yet steady. "I understand your hesitation, ma'am. I have made grave mistakes, and I cannot undo them, but I can offer my actions now, my effort to make things right. I only hope you will let me show you that I am committed to doing better." Mrs. Henderson studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded, her expression softening. "Actions, huh? I'll be watching." Lucas watched from a distance, feeling a surge of cautious hope. He realized that witnessing genuine change, not promises, was what would ultimately guide his heart towards full forgiveness. That evening, Mary and Lucas walked home under a steady drizzle, their coats protecting them from the rain. Lucas's eyes were thoughtful, the quiet patter of raindrops mirroring his reflective mood. "I'm ready," he said finally, "ready to stop letting the past dictate my feelings, ready to accept that people can change, even when it's hard to believe." Mary smiled gently, her hand brushing his arm. "You've taken the first step, Lucas. Remember, change is a slow, persistent river. It carves the hardest stone over time. Be patient with yourself and patient with others." That night, as Mary sat by her apartment window, she watched the rain glide down the glass, feeling a profound sense of calm. She understood now that trust could be rebuilt, but it required courage, observation, and a willingness to believe in someone's transformation. And she could see that Lucas, her son, was beginning to embrace that understanding.
The following Saturday, the Grace Hands Community Center buzzed with energy. The aroma of fresh bread from the small kitchen mingled with the faint scent of rain-soaked pavement drifting through open windows. Mary moved quietly among the volunteers, her gray and cream patterned blouse softening her strong features as she checked on each table and greeted every elderly visitor with warmth. Lucas followed close behind, still cautious, yet carrying a subtle air of purpose. He had spent the week reflecting on his mother's words. Every evening, after hours of silent contemplation, he'd replay moments of Clara's betrayal, juxtaposed with Cassandra's
Cassandra's consistent efforts to rebuild trust. A subtle shift had begun. His anger was still present, but it no longer dictated his thoughts. He was learning that forgiveness was less about the other person and more about freeing oneself from the chains of past pain. That morning, Lucas noticed Mrs. Henderson struggling to navigate a new mobility aid, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the walker. Cassandra was across the room assisting another resident, her back momentarily turned. Without thinking, Lucas stepped forward, offering a steady hand. "Mrs. Henderson," he said gently, "let me help you." Her eyes widened, surprise flickering across her face. "You? You?" Lucas nodded. "I know I'm not Cassandra, but I'm part of this now. I want to help too." Mary, watching from across the room, felt a swell of pride in her chest. This simple act, a son assisting someone who had every reason to doubt him, was the tangible proof of the shift occurring in Lucas. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, but the seed had been planted. Later, as the day moved forward, a sudden commotion drew everyone's attention. A new volunteer, a young man named Devin, had tripped over a loose floor mat, knocking over a stack of donation boxes. The boxes spilled onto the floor, and some of the contents, a mixture of warm clothing, toiletries, and a few fragile personal items, scattered across the hallway. Chaos erupted as volunteers scrambled to help, but Lucas acted immediately. He knelt down, methodically gathering the items, placing each carefully back into the boxes. Cassandra appeared, her hands moving to assist, but Lucas waved her off gently. "I've got this," he said firmly. "We'll do this together." As they worked side by side, Lucas felt a quiet strength building inside him. The past, the resentment, the feelings of helplessness, they were no longer chains, but lessons guiding him toward understanding and compassion. When the boxes were finally restored, Mrs. Henderson approached once more, her face softening. "I see now," she said quietly. "Actions speak louder than words. You've earned a measure of trust today, young man." Lucas met her gaze, feeling a release he hadn't felt in months. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning wrongdoing. It was about reclaiming one's own heart. That evening, Mary, Lucas, and Cassandra gathered around a small table in the community center, reviewing plans for the next week's outreach program. The atmosphere was quiet, but filled with a new sense of harmony. Cassandra looked at Lucas, her expression cautious but hopeful. "Lucas, I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for letting me continue to prove myself. Your trust means more than I can say." Lucas paused, considering her words. He remembered the nights of rage, the sleepless hours replaying betrayals in his mind, yet he also remembered Mary's guidance, the countless instances where Cassandra had acted with integrity and care. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady. "I don't trust you blindly, but I can see you're trying, and that's enough for me to start forgiving. Not forgetting, but forgiving." Tears welled in Cassandra's eyes, and she nodded silently. It was a moment that needed no further words. A bridge had been built between past mistakes and present compassion. Mary watched from across the room, her heart swelling with quiet triumph. Her son was learning the essence of humanity, not vengeance, not resentment, but the ability to rise above pain and extend grace. She felt the weight of years of hardship lifting slightly, the knowledge that her family could heal, that trust could be rebuilt through consistent, honest effort. The week concluded with a small ceremony at the center, recognizing volunteers who had shown exceptional dedication. Lucas stood beside Cassandra and Mary, receiving a quiet nod of acknowledgement from the senior community. The applause was gentle, but it resonated deeply, a validation of effort, patience, and transformation. Later that night, as Mary tucked herself into her bed, the soft hum of a ceiling fan above her and the faint echo of the city below, she reflected on the day. The storm of anger and betrayal that had once dominated their lives had begun to settle. She thought of Lucas, watching him sleep peacefully, and she understood that the hardest battles were often fought within oneself. Forgiveness was a gift, not to the one who wronged, but to the one who dared to release the weight of past grievances. And in that understanding, Mary felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a quiet, unshakable peace that no external circumstances could disturb. The following week brought a new challenge to Grace Hand's Community Center. A local philanthropist from Chicago, Mrs. Evelyn Porter, had heard of their work and wanted to donate a substantial sum to expand their program. programs. The offer was generous, enough to fund a new wing, hire additional volunteers, and provide more outreach for seniors. But there was a catch. She requested complete transparency, including access to financial records, staff schedules, and donor histories. Mary welcomed the opportunity, but felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. In her 62 years, she had learned that money could amplify good intentions, but also expose weaknesses. She turned to Lucas and Cassandra, her eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "Are you both ready for this?" she asked gently. "This is a real test, not of funds, but of who we are." Lucas nodded, his brown eyes steady. "Mom, I've learned that honesty is our foundation. We'll be ready." Cassandra's hands tightened slightly on the table, her expression a mixture of nervousness and resolve. "I won't let you down," she said softly. The next morning, Mrs. Porter arrived, accompanied by her assistant, a meticulous young man named Theodore. Their inspection began quietly, with Theodore taking meticulous notes, while Mrs. Porter observed the volunteers interacting with the seniors. Lucas led her through the records, explaining each donation, each expenditure, and each initiative that had been funded. Mary watched him closely. He spoke confidently, clearly, yet with the humility that came from having truly learned the value of accountability. She realized that her son, once hesitant and angry, was now embodying the principles she had spent decades instilling in him. Cassandra followed behind, guiding Mrs. Porter to the storage room where recent donations had been logged. As she opened boxes and described the allocation process, she noticed a few receipts that were misfiled. Nothing serious, just human error. Heart pounding, she corrected the errors on the spot, explaining them transparently. Lucas, standing nearby, gave her a reassuring nod. "This is what I've been waiting to see," Mrs. Porter said quietly. "Integrity isn't about perfection. It's about facing mistakes and making them right. You've proven your foundation is built on that." Mary felt a lump in her throat. For years, she had feared the foundation would never reach this point. The human flaws would undermine the work she had fought so hard to create. But here before her was proof that mistakes did not define them. Courage and honesty did. That afternoon later, after the philanthropist had left with a promise to finalize the donation, Lucas remained behind with Mary and Cassandra. He looked around the room, the tables cluttered with files, coffee cups, and volunteer notes. The center had grown far beyond the walls Mary had once walked alone, yet she saw personal growth in Lucas that matched the physical expansion. "I never realized how heavy honesty could feel," Lucas admitted quietly. "Facing every mistake, every misstep, it's exhausting, but I also feel lighter, free." Mary smiled, placing a hand over his. "That's because you're finally embracing truth without fear. Forgiveness and redemption start from within, Lucas. You've taken the hardest step already." Cassandra, standing a few feet away, added softly, "And we've learned that accountability isn't punishment, it's growth. Every day we choose to act rightly, we rebuild what was broken." That evening, as rain began to patter against the windows, Lucas sat alone in the office reviewing the weekly volunteer reports. A letter had arrived from one of the seniors they had helped months ago, an elderly woman named Mrs. Grayson. She wrote about how the foundation had restored her sense of dignity and connection to the world. Reading her words, Lucas felt a warmth spreading through his chest. He understood now that redemption wasn't just about his own family. It was about the countless lives touched by acts of integrity, compassion, and perseverance. Each small victory, each honest choice, built a bridge for others to follow. As the night grew darker, Mary joined him, carrying 2 mugs of steaming tea. They sat in silence, listening to the rain and watching the soft lamplight cast shadows across the room. "You've changed," Mary said finally, breaking the quiet, "not just by forgiving, but by stepping into the life we've built here and owning it fully." Lucas looked down at the tea in his hands, the warmth seeping into his palms. "I had to. I wanted to stop running from myself, from my mistakes. I see now that my failures didn't make me weak. They gave me the chance to become stronger." Mary nodded, tears threatening to spill. "That strength will guide you every day, Lucas, and it will guide
greet everyone who comes through these doors. Outside, the rain softened, leaving a faint mist that carried the scent of wet earth and lavender from the small garden. Inside, a sense of peace settled over the office, a quiet acknowledgement that the hardest tests often revealed the truest character. In that moment, Lucas felt a profound connection to the values Mary had always lived by: love, forgiveness, honesty, and the courage to face life's storms with an open heart. He understood that the foundation was more than a building or a program. It was a reflection of the human spirit at its best.
The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds over Chicago, casting a golden glow on the Grace Hands Community Center. Mary walked through the garden, her hands brushing against the lavender that still clung to droplets of overnight rain. She paused for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the scent of earth and flowers settle her spirit. For the first time in years, the weight of betrayal, regret, and doubt felt distant, like a storm that had finally passed. Inside, Lucas and Cassandra were already at work, reviewing upcoming programs and preparing thank you letters for donors. Their faces reflected determination and quiet joy, the kind that comes from knowing you are truly contributing to something meaningful. Mary smiled, watching them, her heart swelling with pride. She had raised 2 children who not only survived hardship, but had learned to transform it into hope for others. Later that afternoon, a special event was announced, a recognition ceremony for volunteers, donors, and the seniors whose lives had been touched. Mary was asked to give the opening speech. She stood on the modest stage in the main hall, a light blue dress flowing gently, her hair pinned neatly back, and her eyes bright with the calm of someone who had seen both the depths of despair and the heights of redemption. "Today," Mary began, her voice steady yet warm, "we celebrate more than just achievements. We celebrate courage, the courage to face betrayal, to embrace truth, and to choose compassion even when it's hardest. Every story you've shared, every effort you've made has been a testament to the human spirit's capacity for growth." The crowd, a mix of young volunteers, elderly beneficiaries, and community supporters, listened intently. Among them, Lucas and Cassandra exchanged a brief glance, a silent acknowledgement of the journey that had brought them here. After the ceremony, Mary stepped outside, the sun warming her face. She looked toward the horizon, thinking of the past years, the moments of fear, the nights spent crying alone, the endless struggle to reclaim what had been stolen. She remembered the woman who betrayed them, the choices that led to loss, and the pain that had seemed insurmountable. And yet, she no longer carried anger. Anger, she realized, was a chain. Forgiveness, true forgiveness, was freedom, not because those who hurt her deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Lucas approached her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Mom," he said softly, handing her one, "I've been thinking about what you said the first day we rebuilt this place. About truth, about integrity, about facing life with an open heart. I understand it now more than ever, and I want to keep living it, every day." Mary smiled, warmth radiating from her face. "You already are, Lucas, and by living it, you'll help others find their own strength." Cassandra joined them, placing a hand on Mary's shoulder. "We've all changed. Mary, it's because of the example you set. Love, forgiveness, and the courage to act rightly." They sat together in silence for a moment, watching as the sunlight danced across the garden, the lavender swaying gently in the breeze. The community center, once a small, struggling space, now thrived as a beacon of hope, a testament to resilience and compassion. As evening approached, Mary retired to her office, opening her worn journal. She wrote slowly, each word deliberate. "Today, I feel complete. The journey of loss, betrayal, and redemption has led me here, to a place of peace, faith, and purpose. I have learned that life will not always be fair,
that people will fail us, and that mistakes are inevitable. But within every failure lies an opportunity to rise, to forgive, and to love without reservation. To those who have followed my story, remember this: honesty, integrity, and love are forces that can heal even the deepest wounds. Carry them forward, and your life will find its own light. She closed the journal gently, the soft click of the cover echoing like a final note of closure. Outside, the city lights flickered as stars began to appear. Mary stepped onto the porch, feeling the cool breeze and inhaling the fresh scent of night rain. She looked down the street and imagined the countless lives that would continue to benefit from Grace Hand's Community Center. The seniors who would find dignity, the volunteers who would learn humility, the children who would witness compassion in action. Lucas and Cassandra joined her, standing side by side. Mary placed her hands on their shoulders, looking into their eyes. "Remember," she said softly, "life may test you, people may betray you, but the truth, your integrity, and your heart will always lead you home." That night, Mary lit a small candle in her office, letting its flickering flame cast shadows over the photographs of her family. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for survival, for love, for the lessons learned through suffering, and she smiled, knowing that the light of hope would always remain, no matter what storms came. The journey had ended, but the story lived on in every life touched, every heart healed, and every act of courage that followed. If you've stayed with me until the end of this story, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from tonight? Who in your life inspires you to stay strong even after betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can join me for the next journey of hope, love, and redemption.